What if the version of you that isolates and the version of you that escapes into noise are actually the same survival strategy? One that wants to escape everyone, and the other one that cannot sit still with its own thoughts. So sometimes you isolate because everything just feels like too much. And other times you may reach outward. Noise, movement, other people, just anything to avoid your own inner world. And you may keep asking yourself, am I healing or am I avoiding? But what if you're not broken? What if your nervous system is oscillating? Not because you're inconsistent, but because it just learned how to survive. Maybe you recognize both impulses, the urge to withdraw and the urge to reach outward. Sometimes one dominates, sometimes the other. And it can feel like you're fighting yourself. And maybe you thought you were inconsistent, you were too sensitive, too intense. But what if the problem is not inconsistency? What if it's dysregulation and adaptation? Here is the thing, when your inner world is loud, when there is internal conflict, misalignment, shame, grief, anxiety, your nervous system just wants relief. But regulation doesn't always look the same for everyone. If you learned as a kid that connection was soothing, you might reach outward. Noise, movement, other people's energy, just anything external would work. But if you learned that connection was unsafe, then you might completely shut down instead. Isolate, withdraw, go ghost, disappear. And if your early environments were inconsistent or unpredictable, then in this case, you might swing between both. So none of that is weakness, it's just adaptation. Your body did whatever it could to survive. And what you call who I am might just be the way how your nervous system learned to cope. And if you're being completely honest, none of these modes felt like freedom, they felt like protection. And here's the shift. When your inner world gets quieter, when you're more aligned and less at war with yourself, then the outside chaos starts to feel louder than inside. And distractions that used to be necessary for you just no longer work. Because once safety increases, your survival patterns and strategies just start to feel like self-betrayal. And you've probably noticed people share lately, is it just me, or since I started doing the work, I feel less drawn to socializing, people, that constant noise, chaotic environments, and just trying to fill every empty space. Not because they hate people, but because their nervous system no longer needs to drown something out. That's not being antisocial. That's increased capacity. I remember this moment so clearly as if it was yesterday. I was living in Chicago and my life looked great on the outside, like I was thriving. Busy social calendar, rooftop parties, a new restaurant every week, the beautiful PayPal office at Merchandise Mart right next to the Riverwalk. The kind of place that people said, you made it. Constant networking, business lunches, after work drinks. I was always somewhere, always with someone, and always doing something. The kind of life that photographs well. And then one Friday night, I remember sitting at this loud restaurant in River North, surrounded by people I knew. Everyone is drinking, talking loudly about people who are not even there, gossiping, discussing plan status, just noise. And I remember I had this very strange, almost out-of-body experience. I could see myself from the side, all dressed up for the night I didn't even want to be at, holding a drink I didn't even want. And that look in my eyes, it wasn't sadness, it was emptiness and disconnection. I knew I'd wake up the next morning, hungover. I would go to the office I secretly resented, make money to pay for the apartment in a city I didn't even want to be in anymore. And suddenly that thought hit me. What am I doing? Why am I here? You know, from the outside, this life looked abundant, but inside it felt so empty. Not because the people were bad and not because the city was wrong, but because I was no longer aligned and it felt like I was abandoning myself. So I asked myself something simple. If I were aligned, what tonight would look like? And then immediately that image came. A sunset hike, silence, wind, wearing comfortable clothes, no alcohol, maybe one close friend, or maybe it's just me. Warm tea instead of another round. A real heart-to-heart conversation that actually meant something. Or maybe no conversation, just presence. And that contrast was so painful that I realized that I hadn't failed. I had outgrown that life. And that night was not about the restaurant, my job, or other people. It was about me finally telling myself the truth. That I no longer belong in that version of my life. So the real question isn't isolation or engagement. It's how do I regulate without abandoning myself or abandoning the world? And the work isn't just picking one side. It's learning how to move between inner and outer, but consciously. And maybe earlier you escaped inner chaos through external stimulation, and now you're learning containment. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe isolation always felt safer for you, and now you're learning how to re-enter this world without losing yourself. And yes, this fear is intelligent, because intuitive, aware people often over-identify with introspection. You can become incredibly hyper aware, reflective, and insightful, and slowly stepping out of participation. So the answer isn't isolation, and it's not constant engagement either. It's discernment. It's knowing when you're withdrawing to restore and when you're withdrawing to avoid. When you're reaching out to connect and when you're reaching out to escape. And sometimes what looks like self-awareness is just avoidance in disguise. And it's not happening in vacuum. We're also living in a world that is louder than any nervous system was designed for. Constant information, constant outrage, social media, AI-generated content everywhere. Opinions on top of opinions on top of opinions. It is so extremely challenging to see what is true, what is real, and what is not, both internally and externally. So if you feel like you're oscillating more than ever, that makes sense. It's just your nervous system is trying to regulate in the system that never turns off. This is where spirituality can mislead sensitive people, because we're often told all answers are within. Go inward, detach, be alone. And yes, truth lives within. But it's only half the story, because people are not living in caves. Somewhere along the way, we absorb this image that if you're spiritual, you reject the world, you renounce money, and you detach from desire. But if you build, create, earn, and succeed, then somehow you're less spiritual. But that's duality, and duality is a trap. Life moves in cycles. Inhale, inward. Exhale, outward. If you only go inward, you disconnect. If you only go outward, you burn out. So we're not meant to choose one over the other. And a lot of what we call spiritual growth is actually fear dressed up as wisdom. Withdrawal can look really enlightened, while in reality it's just avoidance. And the opposite distortion exists too. Material success doesn't require greed. Resources can be a reflection of alignment, and they're not inherently corrupt. And spiritual depth doesn't require deprivation. Participating in this world doesn't make you less spiritual somehow. And this is not just philosophical, it's also physiological. There is also a nervous system upgrade that happens during healing. Stage 1, I need the outside world to stabilize me. Stage 2, I can stabilize myself internally. But stage 3 isn't isolation. It's conscious movement between inner and outer without shame. And here's the harder truth. Your nervous system will probably always stay sensitive. So the goal is not to eliminate the need for regulation. It's to consciously use inner and outer resources without abandoning yourself and pushing others away. If you're trying to understand your own pattern, just ask yourself, what does my nervous system actually need right now? Is it silence? Is it movement? Is it light social presence? Maybe deep connection or expression or reset? Don't choose what is spiritually superior. Just be honest and choose what is truly needed by your system right now. Regulate first and then analyze later. If you're flooded right now, go for a walk, move your body, change environments, just do something to get yourself out of that survival mode. Because trying to solve existential questions while you're dysregulated rarely works, trust me. Also, curate your co-regulation. And for that, you don't need many people. You need safe people. People who are emotionally available and regulated. People who do not avoid you or dismiss you or make you feel like you are too much or your emotions are too much. People who do not dismiss your needs or make you feel like you have to shrink to fit in. People who do not subtly compete with you for space, dominance, or attention. People who are clear, steady, predictable, who do not confuse you. Safety is not perfection. It's just you finally being able to truly relax in their presence. And it's feeling that you did not left the interaction smaller than when you arrived. It's always quality over intensity. If you've been swinging between isolation and escape, you're not broken and you're not inconsistent. You're just sensitive in a world that profits from your dysregulation. Because a truly regulated person is incredibly hard to manipulate, hard to provoke, to scare, or to sell to. And when you become more regulated, you become less reactive to noise, not because you're withdrawn, but because you're no longer interested in systems built on outrage. And because you're no longer participating in systems that profit from your dysregulation. And when you stop running, you don't disappear. You come back into your body and you start making choices from clarity instead of survival. And when that happens, something shifts. You realize that there was nothing wrong with you. You were just adapting, and now you don't have to. And from there, you choose where to go.